So tonight we have a special service planned, and we want to go ahead and press pause on our Unearthing Questions series, even though we've been having a lot of fun with that series. We're going to press pause for a minute, and tonight, as most of you might have known already, but if you don't know, tonight is Mission Saturday, and we want to go ahead and talk about what that means to us here at One Church. Our core values, just to let some of you know that might be new, and just a refresher for all of us, our core values here at One Church are openness, humility, and community. And we really, really strive to own that. And that is hard. We all know that humility is hard. Sometimes being open and vulnerable, very hard. Community, it can be challenging. And we want to really hone in on community tonight. That we value love and support that we find within God and Spirit, but also with each other. And that really, honestly, this spiritual journey is nothing without community. It's painful without community. And we've done it. How many of you have done spirituality all on your own with nobody? And sometimes you can grow immensely in those moments. And sometimes you feel like you need people along this journey. And so we've here discovered that it's not just about us, that we are in a place that this life is so much more than just our lives, our small, simple lives, but it's so much bigger than that. So to us, community is not just about ourselves and what we can receive, although we do that well here, we also give really well here. And so to us, that's community, this reciprocal giving, receiving. And we see that in God's love as well, this giving and receiving. And to us, community is also ways we can help those beyond ourselves. And sometimes you see communities kind of become insular, and it just becomes about them. And we recognize that we can do so much in this world, especially if we band together. So in Romans 12, verse 13, this scripture is so simple and straight to the point. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Very simple. And I love that it says practice hospitality, because I think it's getting at that sometimes hospitality doesn't always come naturally to some of us, and sometimes we mess it up. Sometimes we think we know what people want, and it's not what they want, or sometimes we're serving, and it maybe isn't working successfully. And so to practice again and again, we're given this invitation to practice again and again, being hospitable, serving, loving community outside of One Church. So with that in mind, with keeping in mind giving and receiving, and knowing that some of us have more and some of us have less in this world, we want to talk about missions, which is something that we really have a heart for. But I want to do a quick caveat that for many of you, missions may have meant something different in your previous church backgrounds. How many of you were raised in a tradition where missions meant evangelize? It's the majority of the people. How many of you, the word missions meant serve? We've got a couple. So predominantly we do see a lot of times it's just about evangelizing, and yet we see that the way of Christ is to follow that way, which Christ talks again and again about feeding those in need, clothing those in need, being there for those that are desperate and have less than we have. And so we see this call, and I want us to kind of keep that perspective tonight. But at this moment, let's go ahead and watch a missions video. Just to kind of recap, we go on a missions trip, I think it's twice a year now, and this will just recap our last missions trip that we had, and how much fun it is as a community, but also the different things that we encounter together at One Church.
It was really beautiful as I experienced just serving without an agenda and without trying to convert someone, but serving just because we want to make someone's life better. And then experiencing that with other people who were used to being rejected and maybe had never had that opportunity or never considered the opportunity.
I still try to describe in words what happened for me, and I just don't really feel like I can. But with these kids, there was just something about them where the whole world around was just completely shut off. I just wanted to try to bring just a tiny bit of light, to them. And it's crazy because they brought more light to me and to my heart that I feel like I could ever even try to give to them, you know.
I can't even describe to you the peace that gives me to know that one trip, one 3-day weekend with 37 people, what has happened as a result of that for their community, for our community, for individuals. I mean, I've had an outpouring of people who've said so many things that just touched my heart so deeply about how this impacted them and what it means for their life and how they don't look at life through the same lens because of this experience. And I can completely relate to that because my life has been changed.
Thank you. Going to the distribution center. Let me tell you about it. It's a little place where we distribute things.
Yeah, we're gonna go love on kids, man, all day. Good to see the kids that we saw last time. Show them our face again, so they're like, hey, I know you. Yeah.
Last time I was like reserved last time for some reason. I think I was in my head. Maybe because I've done service projects before and it was different than I expected. So this time I'm gonna get out of my box and just squish them all.
They're gonna prepare breakfast in here for the kids that wouldn't normally have breakfast.
2 days. We're here on Saturday, and on Monday morning at 7, we're going to serve 180 hot breakfasts, and then in the afternoon we'll be serving 80-some lunches to the kids in the morning and afternoon sessions. So 2 days from now we'll be feeding kids.
We are headed to paint a school. We're headed back to the house that we were at yesterday.
We're electricians!
Woo! An awesome single mom and her kids. Yesterday we did the outside of the house. Okay. We put up paper and then chicken wire so we can do stucco later.
Oh, nice.
Perfect measurement, Loretta and Larry. Take that. What we've been doing, Danny and I, is we've been drilling holes through, and as you can see, we ran a hot line so they could put a water heater eventually back here.
This is a family of a single mom that was abused and so forth through her life. So we got 3 teenagers that actually live here. Okay, and then we're actually here to support them, just give them a little bit of a place to live and so forth. Okay.
My heart. I just love these kids. I want to steal every single one of them and just give them all my love. Every last bit of it. Even if we can't solve world hunger and homelessness and all of these things, that we can just be a moment of breath of fresh air. And that's what God is, I think, for us, is that sometimes that breath of fresh air, we need to just be like, whew, okay, great.
Never in my wildest dreams would I think I'd be on a mission trip with my church and then laying with my wife on the beach. You know, I am good enough and I'm worthy to have my wife and a great community, and like, we can just be us, you know?
I think for me, in this community, in this weekend, and in the previous trip as well, what I've recognized is that I belong, like, for the first time. So thank you for helping me in that and showing me love and belonging and acceptance. I literally could not have asked for a more incredible group of humans to call my family.
One of the companies that we talked about briefly in that video is Ocean View Ministries, and we have partnered up with them every time, and we've talked about them a couple times. The other organization we have yet to talk about is another company called Steps of Love. And I want to go ahead and segue. We're going to have a couple of videos tonight, but I want to segue, and we'll show the video of who Steps of Love is, and then we're going to welcome them to come and speak and share just a little bit of what they do, but also our partnership with this awesome company. So we can go ahead and play that video.
Imagine if you're a young person and you know you're never going to get to go to school, because going to school means that you can't work and then consequently your family's going to go hungry. Or imagine you're a young person and your parents don't read or write because they never had the chance to go to school because their parents didn't have the resources. So they can't take you to school to even fill out the registration papers. If a child is hungry, they're not going to be able to learn effectively. If you don't have adequate shelter, all of these things, if you don't have a safe place to sleep at night, you're not going to succeed academically. So we decided early on, this program couldn't be very narrow in its focus. While our end game, our ultimate goal is to help these kids reach their potential and thrive, primarily through providing access to really quality educational opportunities. We needed to make sure that they had all of those basic needs met as well.
Porque muchas veces no puedo conseguir todo lo que piden en la escuela, y yo antes pensaba que nada más iba a llegar hasta la secundaria porque no tenemos dinero para pagar los estudios universitarios, ya que esos son muy caros.
Yo estoy muy agradecida porque gracias a Dios en primer lugar, y en segundo lugar gracias a Katy, mis hijas van a ser alguien en la vida y no van a estar así como yo antes.
When we decided to launch this program, we figured out what it looked like. We knew we wanted to focus on providing access to educational opportunities for young people in this community. So we were ready to go. And our goal was to serve 25 to 30 students from kindergarten through college age. And by August 3rd, when school started, we had 72 students. We had a tremendous waiting list. And so we expanded our team, and we still have a significant waiting list.
You don't have to pay tuition to go to public schools starting in high school in the States. In Mexico, you do. There's so many other barriers that families face. People will come to the office and they'll be crying because they're just so happy that now their kids can go to school.
Antes, cuando la vivienda no tenía el apoyo que ustedes nos daban a nosotros, ella no iba a la escuela. Nos pagamos mucho de taxi. Y ahora sí estoy contenta con el programa que usted nos está ayudando, porque es una ayuda mucho para nosotros.
I've seen the families change a lot. The kids are doing better at school. Their lives are getting better. You really can change the world, because when you change one kid's life, you change his world and all of its generations to come.
The need is so great. There are so many students in this community that have so much potential, that want so badly to have access to educational opportunities, but all of this takes resources. We account for every penny that is donated so that there is never a question about, is this really going to serve the kids and where is my money going? Now that we've seen what's possible, and we've seen how with such a relatively small investment in each student, we can have such a tremendous impact. It is overwhelming in a sense to me sometimes how many kids are out there. I quite honestly lose sleep sometimes thinking about the kids on our waiting list. I hate the fact that we have a waiting list, because I see what's happening with the kids that do get into our program, and I know that that could be happening with every student. It would be much less expensive and much easier, believe me, if we just provided what we would consider a traditional scholarship and provided 330 students with the resources they need to get in the door. We paid their tuition, bought their uniform, paid for their books, paid for their fees, and said, good luck, we'll see you next fall. And if you make it through that year and are able to get good grades, we'll fund you again. That doesn't work with the families we serve. Because of the lack of resources, because of the obstacles that they face, if we were to do that and say, good luck, we hope it goes well, for most of them it would not go well. So for us, I believe the strength of our program, but what also requires more resources, is that we look at this as whatever it takes, one child, one family at a time. What better investment is there than young people with potential and helping them realize that potential?
Would you mind giving a quick introduction, who you are?
No, but that video, I mean, I already was crying watching your mission video. I was not ready for that. I am Kathleen Duncan, and I wear two hats in terms of this work in Mexico. I am a board member of the U.S. nonprofit Steps of Love here in the U.S. It's based here in Arizona, and it supports the program that you saw in Mexico. I'm also the founder of AIM Peñasco, which is a Mexican civil association, which is comparable to a nonprofit organization here in the U.S. And so I founded that organization in Mexico that runs the program that helps kids go to school and supports them throughout the year. So I wear two hats.
And then my name is Craig Mahaffy, and I work as the program manager for Steps of Love here in Arizona.
Excellent. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks.
We've had an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit outside of this discussion, just recently in the U.S., but also the last couple times that we served. And it was really great to hear more about this story, and I really want people to understand and maybe get an inside look into what that's like. Because for us, we came and showed up. If you've never been on any of our missions trips, they're fun, they're hardworking, they're exhausting, they're tiring, and they're kind of chaotic. They're so organized. Dana does an amazing job, but it's chaotic in the sense that you might be over in this part of Puerto Penasco, and then like the half of the day you're over here, and then you're sort of doing this, and you're kind of all over the place. And I remember my first time showing up at the school, and I forget the name of the school.
I think it was the Livingstones.
Okay, and we showed up, and that was my first encounter of Steps of Love, my very first one. I had no idea who you guys were, what you did. So,
can I just say, we just knew that a church was coming down, and we weren't all that excited. So, it isn't our thing. Usually, we went, we kind of fought over, you host them, no, you host them. We don't embrace. I mean, we try to embrace everybody, but it's usually not our favorite type of volunteer group. But we were. Craig actually called me. I did not make it down there, and he said, "You're not going to believe this. I like these people. You're going to like this church." And I went, "Are you kidding me?" So next time, I made sure I was there. I was like, "Oh my goodness! Like this isn't like any other church. They could come anytime."
It's all true. She's telling the truth.
True. We'll talk more about that later in this discussion, because you pinpointed something that personally grieves me, that an organization would, and not your reaction, but that Christianity in general would cause that kind of reaction. That makes me go, okay, let's think of how we're giving and serving and working in the world. We need to be thinking and doing better, thus this conversation. But first of all, Kathleen, would you mind explaining, you already told us a little bit about how you wear two hats, but would you mind explaining, I guess, how you got involved? Let's start there.
Well, I call this the craziest midlife crisis anyone has ever had. My husband still doesn't quite believe it. It was literally 6 years ago this month, September of 2012. I found myself as an empty nester, 3 boys grown out of the house, off in college, out of college. And I had been very engaged in raising them, but I had also worked throughout my adult life. But in the meantime, our favorite place to vacation had become Rocky Point. We farm, we don't have a lot of time off, so we had for 25 years been vacationing with our family down in Rocky Point. And during my time vacationing there, I often would see kids out on the streets, not in school, washing windows, selling gum in the tourist areas. And I remember so many times over the years vacationing there thinking, that's just terrible, these kids. And you'd see them living in houses made of pallets, with no running water, no electricity, barefoot on the streets. And I remember so many times over those years vacationing thinking, somebody ought to do something about this. Like, these kids should be able to go to school. They don't stand a chance of breaking the cycle of poverty they come from if they don't get to go to school, and somebody should do something. So September of 2012, I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. This was new to me to have. For the first time in my adult life, our farming business had grown and evolved to the point where, for the first time in my adult life, I was in a position that I didn't ever really imagine being in, where I did not have to work full time to go find a job. And so I thought, I'm going to just try and find something. And I have this quote that I read at the time. I was reading this book called The Promise of a Pencil. And it says, purpose is found when you stop thinking about how you exist in the world and you start trying to figure out why you're here. Once you solve that question, everything else will fall into place. And then he follows in the book with, bliss does not come from materials or possessions. It comes from fulfilling one's purpose in this existence. And so as I was reading that and really kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I just got this crazy idea. I live in Buckeye, in Verrado. It's a 3-hour and 15-minute drive for me to go to Rocky Point. There's so much need there. I want to kind of find my purpose. I don't want to go spend a bunch of money and buy a bunch of things. And I literally showed up on September 15th of 2012, spoke this much Spanish, but I found a little emergency children's shelter that had recently been opened by the government, and I rang that little bell, and in my broken Spanish, I told them I wanted to try and come down and help. And so for the next 3 years, I drove every single week, never missed a week, and spent 3 days a week at this little shelter, volunteering there. And at the end of that 3 years, there were some changes in the administration, and I was really in love with the community, saw even more how great the need was, and I decided to form a Mexican Civil Association. Became a permanent resident of Mexico, as did my husband, and we formed this organization because I saw outside of the shelter, out in the community, where you guys all saw in your mission trip and you see in the video, the need is so great. And so I formed a Mexican Civil Association, and we launched this program to try and help get kids into school. And in the meantime, I met a woman who had formed a nonprofit here called Steps of Love. And my husband and I were funding everything ourselves privately that I was doing every week when I was going down. And we knew that that wasn't sustainable long term. And so I joined the board of Steps of Love. And that was great because then we were able to get support from other than just my husband and I for this program. And we launched the program 2 years ago, last month.
So Steps of Love is only 2 years old?
Steps of Love was formed 4 years ago. En Peñasco, the program in Mexico, was launched 2 years ago.
Okay, just want to make sure I got that. Craig, what about you? I know a little bit about your story, and I gather you went to ASU for business.
Correct.
And now you're doing this.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
It's a very interesting story. So I was a student at ASU, and I had learned Spanish not through the classroom, by speaking and talking with friends and people out in the community. So I was great at understanding and great at speaking, but I couldn't really read or write. ASU has this program called the Heritage Program for Spanish speakers. So it's people that grew up speaking Spanish at home. Well, I ended up joining that program, and as part of a class requirement, I had to volunteer speaking Spanish. So I had a friend who knew of this lady named Kathleen who was doing something in Mexico, but he wasn't really sure, but here's her email. So I emailed back and forth with this lady I've never met, and she's like, hey, I'll pick you up at the Chevron on the I-10 in Jackrabbit, and I'll take you down to Mexico, and you and your group of friends for your class can come down and check it out. And I was like, cool, let's do it. So I call my mom, hey mom, I'm
We
on my way
met
to
at a gas station
Mexico.
on the side of the road.
Yep, and it's become a tradition now actually. So actually all of our new interns and volunteers that we have, I pick them up at that same gas station. So it's like an initiation. But anyways, so I started going down my junior year of college, and I fell in love. These kids, and if you've been there, you can attest to this, are incredible. They are beautiful and pure, and that just hooked me. So I kept bugging Kathleen, hey, so when are we going to go next time? Hey, can we go down now? So I just started to volunteer, and so over 2 years, and this was the whole time that Kathleen was starting the nonprofit in Mexico. I would go down and help her, and I really wanted to get involved and to connect ASU. But as I was coming to graduate, I wasn't really able to do that. So I thought, all right, I'm going to go to law school, become an immigration attorney. Let's check out the Peace Corps, Fulbright. I was all over the place. And one day,
I was writing his recommendation letters for all of those things.
So one day I got rejected from Fulbright, so I was like, hey, Kathleen, just want to let you know, I didn't make it, but thank you so much for your support. She goes, look, I know this sounds crazy, and I know you've probably already thought I was crazy, but what if you come work for me? Come move to Mexico and help me develop this program, and we'll just kind of see where it goes from there. And I said yes. So I moved to Mexico a month after I graduated college, lived there for 6 months, and then moved back to Phoenix, and now I'm the only employee at Steps of Love, and I have an amazing board of directors to support me, and a bunch of awesome interns and volunteers as well, and we're trying to make this thing work.
Wow. So you get a sense that it takes a bit of passion for both of them. You see, they recognize a need, it ignites this passion, and then it takes some insanity.
Absolutely.
More than some.
You can see this, there has to be passion to drive something like this. You don't just pack up everything, stop doing what you're doing, and go move to a different country. Yes, I know it's only a few hours away, but any of us that have been there know how drastically different culture is. So in the promotional video, we saw a bit about how Steps of Love works, and we saw that it aids in education. So this is a little bit more broad, but what does a typical week look like for doing work there? Because I know for us, when we come visit, we see the diversity of what goes on. So what does that typically look like?
So I'll start. So when I first moved down there, I was boots on the ground. And so I worked with the local team. At the time, it was 2 individuals, and it was all over the place. We didn't have any rules or procedures or policies to take into consideration. So we'd have families showing up and say, hey, we heard about some group who's trying to help people. And we'd go, yep, that's us. And they go, well, what do you do? And we're like, well, what do you need? And so whatever they needed, we tried to figure out a way to give that to them. And so if that meant partnering with other organizations, working with another nonprofit that provides transportation services, whatever it was, we helped out. And so in the beginning, that's really what it was. Over time, though, it evolved. And then moving back to Phoenix, it's a whole different ballgame. So now it's all the American way. So I go into the office and I sit down and start my computer and I put together my policies and procedures and come out and talk to different groups and try to do fundraising. So it's different on both sides, definitely.
Sure.
And I would say what's really important is how our work has changed. Craig and I were very heavily involved in getting this program launched and working with the local team. It started with just 2 people from the local community, and it's now a team of 15 running the program down there. And so while we were involved to help get it started and provide the support, the structure, the resources, we are pulling back more and more and more. And our work more and more, neither of us enjoy it nearly as much, is here with Steps of Love, because what that program needs from us is for us to be here, raising funds, getting support, sustaining that program financially. The resources just aren't there in the community. And for it to be successful, and we're going to, I think, talk about this a little bit more later, I absolutely, I don't know a lot in this world, and I'm learning so much in this work, but there's one thing I'm certain of is the only way that this program that we have started will be successful long-term is if it's not his and it's not mine and it's no one here in the United States. It's not Steps of Love's program. It has to be people from that community that are passionate about it, that believe in it, and it has to be led. This is not my country. These are not my children. I love all of them, but it is important that we step back and we support, we do capacity building, we train, we provide funding, we go down and help them work through issues, but it is not my program. Our team there will say, Kathy, what do you think about this? And I say, can we do this? Can we start a new homework club? Can we switch the hours of the homework club? I say, I don't know, can you? Should you? This is not my program. And so it's been a transition, but this year I used to go every single week, and now I go about every 2 to 3 weeks. And my role when I go down is I walk in the door and I say, how can I support you? What do you need from me? I don't tell them I'm here to do anything. I say, I'm here to support you. How can I support you while I'm here for the next 4 days? I'll be down there Tuesday through Friday next week, and I haven't been for a few weeks. And I've already emailed them saying, just let me know when I'm there how I can support you. But our work is much more important here now, really, in supporting them from here.
Did you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, and that's why it works for there to be one person here, because there's a team of 15 down there, and they're the ones that are doing all of the work. They're interacting with all of the kids, with the families, dealing with whatever those needs are.
What do you think, we talked about this a little bit when I was down there, but what are some of the biggest needs you see when you're down there? In comparison, okay, Mexico children, U.S. children. When you're here, you must get a little bit of cultural whiplash. Getting here, you're going to the Churchill, which is a new, your son is a part of this new, what would you even call that?
Gathering place.
A new gathering place, downtown Phoenix. So you're in this place that's nice, great. You can have a hip cocktail, and then 2 weeks later, you're with these kids that can barely make ends meet. So I guess I have a couple questions. What does that feel like to sort of have that cultural whiplash? But also, what is some of the biggest needs you're seeing over there?
Boy, I would say the cultural whiplash is a real thing. I struggled when I was going back and forth every single week and spending 3 days a week there, 4 days a week in the States. It was an amazingly positive thing in a lot of ways because from the day I started going down there in September of 2012, I haven't had a bad day. I can't have a bad day. Nothing that can happen in my day can really be an issue. My printer breaks, oh wow. My air conditioning went out this summer on the record hot day, and you know what? The guy couldn't get there till the next day, and people are saying, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I said, you know what? I've got an air conditioner, I've got a house, I've got someone that's gonna come fix it. I just came back from Mexico. They don't have a roof. They don't even have an air conditioner to fix. This is not that big a deal. It really has been good for me, and it helps me always talk about gratitude, to just never sweat the small stuff and realize we go and see these families. I mean, Josefina, you will go. She has twins that were born at 6 months. They're both have severe special needs. One does not walk and talk and is in diapers, and they're 6 now. And then she has an older son, and her husband can't work and he has arthritis, and they live in a shack. And they have so little, but you go to visit this woman, and her life overwhelms me because it's such a load that she carries. And I try to visit her as often as possible, and I say, Josefina, how are you? As soon as I arrive, I am wonderful, Kathy, gracias a Dios. And then she starts telling me about the positive things, what she does have, and then she tells me about the poor neighbor who doesn't have, and these families focus on what they have and not what they don't have. And that has been a really awesome positive thing. The flip side of that is my husband has really had to work with me on being able to go back and forth. When I started going down there regularly, and you see how little these people have and how little they live off of, and they're making $1 an hour. And I struggled we would go out, my in-laws like to take us to these nice fancy dinners, and it's a big family, and I know what that tab is when my father-in-law is paying that bill. And I struggle to enjoy that dinner anymore. And I think, do you know what? I told my husband, that that could have supported one family in our program for a whole year. And he's like, you need to just enjoy this dinner. It's okay. It is hard sometimes to feel okay with what you have and to have so much. And my husband calls it, that he says, you have a bad case of existential guilt. It's like, why did I get, like, why me? You know, not why me, why did this bad happen? Why did this good happen? Why was I born into this life when, you know, that's the kind of the there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, I'm no better than them, but I have so much. And so it has been a process for me to be able to not feel bad about my life here. And my husband keeps reminding me, you know, you're not, the more you have, the more good you can do, and you're doing as much good as you can with what you have. You don't have to feel guilty about it. So it's a process, an ongoing process for me, though.
What about with you, Craig? Because I know now you're back here. How's that adjustment?
Yeah, it was really, really challenging at first. Culture is huge in any place, and you don't realize what goes into that until you live in another one and then come back. From timeliness to picking trash up off the floor to starting off a conversation saying, hello, how are you? Instead of just asking for, hey, Angie, will you send me that email? It's no, hey, Angie, how are you doing? How was your day?
Your grandchildren, how are your children? You've got to go through all that before you ask.
You have to. And the team even gives me a hard time when I'm like, hey, can you guys send me that report? And they're like, well, hello, Craig. How's your day going? And, all right,
we realize how we're such Americans. We're so...
They think you're so aggressive.
They do.
Gosh,
They totally do. They're like, do you not care about us anymore?
They have a lot of drama, too. They're very emotional.
They are.
They get their feelings hurt easily.
So, yeah, it's been a big adjustment. And the thing that I learned, because I went through that whole existential guilt thing, is you can't compare. Because if you do, I would lose my mind. Because how can I be sitting here right now in this building holding a microphone when I know that Natalia, the little girl that I'm holding in that picture, is sitting in like her bedroom and they don't have AC in the back? Like, I could never be okay with that. So it's that kind of cognitive dissonance, I think, because when you're down there, it doesn't matter what you have. What matters is what's inside of you and your willingness to give that and share that with other human beings. And it's beautiful. It gives you perspective on what is really important in life. And you feel this sort of connectivity with other human beings, which I think we all yearn for, we all strive for. I mean, that's why we're all here today, right? It's that connection to something greater than ourselves. And you experience that through these kids, through their smiles, through their laughter, their wanting piggyback rides and to play games. It's beautiful.
It is. That was, I think, almost unanimously the thing that our group came away with. And you hear this all the time with white American evangelicals. They do this missions trip, and they're like, wow, we're so, that was a privilege. But it's true. I think I walked away deeply humbled, thinking what you two just pointed out, the gratitude, that you could see this family that has, in our opinion, nothing. And to them it was, look at what we have. And so then you end up with this guilt. You come back and you think, which is still missing the point, but it's innate within us. It's still missing the point. It's like, look at what we have. And they're grateful for what they have and embracing that. So with that, let's switch gears for just a hot second. Let's talk about, because you mentioned something about you weren't too excited about a church to come. And then we've talked about a little bit about what it's like when groups come over. So let's talk about race and religion just for a minute, because this plays a very large role in missions work. It very much so. And white American evangelicalism has a history of, and we all know it, and we've all done it, we have a history of going to other countries to serve. And I think a lot of our intentions are really good, and sometimes it really ends up being, how can we make you like us? There's a lot of other agendas, or how can we make ourselves feel good and at ease? And we talked about this a little bit, but studies are showing that those ways of helping actually long-term end up hurting because they aren't sustainable. So we think it's really good, pat on the back, I gave this thing, but it actually isn't sustainable. And we talked about that a lot. I remember in the truck ride last time, and when I say truck ride, I mean this thing is like a trampoline. You're bouncing all through Mexico. We talked a little bit about missions and what that looks like and how that can be sustainable and what they really need and what communities really need. And I'll never forget you said what they really need is to learn how to be functioning and sustainable on their own. So they need education. They need these things. They don't need you to come just give a backpack and a high five and leave. They actually need this sustainability. So would you mind talking, either of you, talking a bit about that on ways in particularly that churches and Americans in general can better serve others in need?
I'm so glad when I saw that you had included this question in the notes that you sent ahead of time, I was so glad. This has become something that I feel so strongly about. It'll be 6 years and 2 days that I've been spending half my life there, and I've seen over and over and over again groups come down, and they do have the best of intentions. A lot of them are church groups. But what I see happens a lot is, number one, a lack of respect for the fact that this is not my country. We as Americans like to go all over. I mean, we are a very powerful nation. We're used to, in the world being leaders. And when we go into another country, we just, as Americans, tend to think we know better than everyone else what's best. And if only they would do things our way. And we want to go fix things our way. And I have a great quote here. I have a good friend that some very dear friends of ours that opened an orphanage in South Africa. And Bob shared with me this quote when I started doing this work. He said, anytime a volunteer comes to their orphanage in South Africa, he gives them a little card and he asks them to read it when they land. And it's a quote from a late Anglican missionary whose name was Max Morin. And he said, quote, our first task whenever approaching another people, another culture, another religion, is to take off our shoes, for the place we're approaching is holy. Else we may find ourselves treading on people's dreams. More serious still, we may forget that God was there before our arrival. Mm-hmm. I just want to blow this up and hand it to every church that comes down there. It infuriates me when groups come down and they are of a certain faith and they feel that it is appropriate and culturally respectful to these families that we work with. These children in our program have parents and have families who have the right to raise those kids in whatever faith. It's a very Catholic country. There are Mormon churches. There are so many different faiths there. But it is not okay to come down and serve, in my mind, and I guess I call it conditional. We will help you, but only if you choose to believe what we are here to sell, what we believe, and we want you to believe. And we honestly have had groups come down. There's one mission group down there that does food dispenses these boxes for families that really need it. They don't get the box of food until they are required to attend a Bible study and a service, and then they get a ticket to get their food box. I have a problem with that. I don't think any Jesus that I know or that I'm familiar with, or whoever your higher power is going to say that my support is conditional. I will give you this food box, but first you have to, I think Jesus would invite you to his Bible study, or would not have a problem with that church group inviting them and making that open. But to make your support and trying to help conditional we see that a lot, and we see a lack of respect for, as I said, the fact that these families already have a faith. So I always approach it my shirt. People say, I am an anomaly down there. Nobody knows what to make of me. So what church are you with? None. What mission trip are you? My whole first 3 years down there, I walked around saying, I'm just a human being down here trying to figure out how I can make a difference in the lives of these kids that have so much potential, and I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just a human being, and I don't think this is not God's work. It's a shift in I guess in the bigger picture, but I do feel strongly about that, and I'm glad that Angie included this in the discussion, because the other thing that we see is, I call it the shotgun approach. Churches come down. We just had how many different churches come down, do mission trips to give backpacks and school supplies to hundreds and hundreds of kids. And I've seen the pictures blasted all over Facebook. with them patting themselves on the back, and it's wonderful that they do that, and there's wonderful intentions, and I don't mean to say that that's a bad thing or to judge. That's great that they do that. What I feel so strongly about, and the reason I started my civil association there, was I saw this over and over again, and you hand the backpacks, and then you go home, and we'll see you next year. Mm-hmm. But what happens tomorrow and the next week when that kid's transportation falls through, or they're sick and they don't have access to medical care, or mom and dad can't read or write, so they can't help them with homework. So you brought them in the door, but then you walked away. And so my goal, the thing that makes this program so unique, having that local team of 15 people, social workers, psychologists, teachers, is we keep showing up for these kids, day after day, week after week, month after month. It's not a go down, throw some backpacks at the kids and walk away and not really make a difference. It's taking the time to empower a local team to be there to support these kids.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I think it's easy for us to have this idea that because we have more here, we're better than they are. And so you go down and you see what they don't have, and you don't have this system in place, so you should put that system in place, and I'm going to help you and I'm going to do it. And they go, well, why would I want to do that? Because I can just do this other thing. And we have such a hard time as Americans, honestly, I think all of us, in letting go of that and saying, that's just how they do things. And it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And different is okay. And there's more than one way to live life. That's really been a huge takeaway of mine is there's so many ways to live life. And I think a lot of times people are so obsessed and focused with perfecting themselves that they kind of portray that onto others and try to, through their experience, force other people to do what they think should be done.
Sure.
And one of the things that I say a lot is, in my work there, I see myself as, I'm not from that country, and it is not my program, and they are not my kids. But I see myself, I try to function as, my goal is to be a gracious guest in a country that's not my own, and to understand that I may have some things to teach, but there are so many facets of that culture that I can learn from, and I do not know better than them how to do things. And so I think if we can all think of ourselves as being gracious guests in a country and go and try to learn as much as we're trying to share knowledge that we have, we're going to be a lot more successful.
That's really good. Knowing that everyone's a teacher, but everyone's a student. It's reciprocal. That quote was really moving. The quote that you read, knowing and keeping in mind that one sentence that God was already there before we came. And sometimes we have this idea of our faith, our way of being, believing is right, and anything else that you didn't have before is wrong. And knowing that is sacred ground, that's holy ground, this is where they live. And I saw that deep respect when we visited you guys, this deep respect for this land, for these people. And it wasn't missions trips that I've been a part of before, which was sort of the typical.
And you were like a church that we've been hosted before.
So it was very mutual, like, wow, this is different. And it, for us, made, I think what made the difference, and we'll segue into this part of the service, is the difference is we didn't feel like we were coming to do the shotgun approach. Here, bam, see you later. It felt like we were invited into an invitation of potentially walking alongside these people. And that I really enjoyed, is we got to get to know them, we got to hear their stories, and it really made me think, that is probably a lot more Christ-centered way of doing things. Rather than this conditional, here you can have this food basket only if X, Y, and Z, but rather, not only can you have the food basket, but let's see each other every once in a while. Hey, do you want to come sit at my table? Hey, let's get to know one another. And that's what I loved, is Steps of Love really has a lot of different ways to be a part of this. So let's segue into that for a minute. Why don't we go ahead and show the next video, and we'll switch gears onto that, on ways one church can continue to be a part of that.
One of the first families we met at the very first camp we did was an amazing family, and the children, their 3 youngest children, were attending our little camp, and we learned that they weren't going to school and they never had been to school. And so when we went to talk to the family at the end of the camp and meet the family and come to know their story, what we found was this family wanted so badly for their kids to be able to go to school. The mother and father never had the opportunity to go even to kindergarten.
Así es lo que le pasó a la Yolanda cuando entraba a la escuela del kinder de aquí al centro, porque no teníamos dinero para taxi. Los taxis llegaban 500 pesos a la semana. Es mucho.
Aparte lo que le dábamos para la botana.
Sí.
She actually cried when she explained to me that she wanted so badly, and she tried to send Yolanda to kindergarten, but by the end of that 2 weeks, it became clear to her that she had to choose between education and food. And she chose food, and that's what any good mother would do, is she would choose to feed her family.
And that's really, I think, where the spark for Kathleen happened. Seeing this girl who had this drive and this tenacity and this ability to overcome barriers, but she had a barrier she couldn't overcome. And Kathleen realized that with her nonprofit, she could help her overcome that barrier.
My family and I have been coming down here vacationing for many years. Like most people that came down here to vacation, I just enjoyed the beaches and the restaurants and all the touristy areas. And you know, at that time, I sometimes probably noticed the kids out in the malecon selling gum or helping their parents, working out on the streets or washing windows. And I had started thinking more and more as we came down here to vacation about those kids that were not going to school and wondering why they weren't. We went and met and talked to families. We went and offered these camps out in the communities in some of the areas of highest need in this community so that we could ask the questions and talk to the families and get to know what are those obstacles. Just seeing how many kids in this community do not have access to education helped us decide that that's where we wanted to focus. That's what we wanted to do. And so Yolanda's family were the first that we took into our program. Yolanda started out 2 years behind, but she was so motivated and so hungry for learning that by the end of her first year in school, she was not only caught up, but she was at the top of her class. So after school every day, Yolanda would come home and teach her mom everything she had learned that day and how to sound out different words. So as Yolanda is learning how to read and write, her mom is learning how to read and write.
Yolanda knew that she was lucky enough to have an opportunity. And now if you talk to her, she says, I want to be a teacher. I want to help kids go to school. And to hear a little girl say those things, it drives home the impact that education has had in her life. You see that education doesn't just impact an individual, but the entire family.
So one of the things I love about what you guys do is you offer, in a way, sort of like the sponsor a child type method, which works for a lot of people, give a certain amount a month. But rather than, we talked about this a little, rather than you sponsor a child and you get their name and their info, you don't do that, but you invite a bigger call to action, which is when you give and you invest in this, not only do we encourage you to be more a part of that, but we're so close, you can come and visit and be a part of the community. And that's where you really, I think for some people, they can't travel, and so sponsoring is perfect. And we all know, and One Church knows, that donations make everything happen. We're the same way. As a nonprofit, we understand it. Every dollar matters. But you also always encourage people to give of their time and service. And so could you speak a little, like we tend to think that what good will our help do? It's just like a drop in the ocean. It's not going to really matter. So can you speak a little bit about what, if sponsoring a child, what $35 a month makes in the difference of the life of a child?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really, I get asked a lot, why there? Why not? There's kids in need in the United States. Why are you doing this work there? And my answer is usually threefold. Number one, the need is so great. We don't see kids regularly out on the, I know there are kids in needs in this country, believe me. I have my master's in child psychology, and I worked as a social worker in Arizona for many years, but we don't have kids out of school, hundreds and hundreds. 70% of our kids do not drop out of school after 6th grade, and then another 70% after middle school because they have to pay for high school. We don't see kids regularly barefoot out on the streets, not at school working. It's against the law here to not send your kids to school. And so the need is so great. We don't have drive-by everyday families that are living without running water, electricity, basic needs. The other thing is, quite honestly, I can have such a bigger impact. We can have such a bigger impact there with fewer resources. So our entire team last year, it was an administrator, an executive director, an administrator. These are all full-time professional positions. 2 psychologists, 4 teachers, and our entire budget for salaries expenses for salaries for the year were $58,000. I can't hire one professional here for $58,000. We can have such an impact there, so much more so than we can here, and the need is so great. So the $35 figure that we came up with was when we finished our first year of this program, we pulled out all those direct educational expenses, kids from kindergarten through high school. What does it cost for their uniform, their school supplies, their books, their fees, their registration? They have to pay registration and tuition for high school there. And we took all of that and divided them by the number of kids we had, and that came out to the $35 a month is what it costs to keep a kid in our program. And that includes not just their direct stuff, but we also then we look for other funding sources, larger donors for our homework clubs. We now have 3 homework clubs in the community, and those take quite a few resources. You have to have we partner with other facilities like you guys do with this church. We find community centers that aren't being used on the weekdays, or churches, they're being used on the weekends, and they allow us to use their space, but we have the teachers and all the materials. So the $35 a month is, I would love to win the lottery. I would love to have some very wealthy donor say, don't worry about it, I'm just going to fund your program 100%. But as much as I would love that, I think we would also be missing something in the program. I personally like a model in terms of making it sustainable and fundable, and what we're shooting for is for some of the larger one-time expenses or annual expenses, like to fund a homework club, to try to find some larger donors, corporations, grants, organizations that can fund a homework club. But I also personally like the connection of, if we have 380 kids in our program, 380 people from here are each sponsoring one of those kids, because then it's also that connection thing. It's the old saying, to the world you may be one person, but to that one child you could be the world. If we have a one-on-one, if we get sponsors for all 380 kids that we're currently serving, that provides such a good, consistent base. And then we look for outside funding, and Craig's working hard on that for some of the larger one-time expenses. The other thing about that is, we've talked about the not shotgunning and the consistency. I'm really liking the idea and wanting to provide, because I see it's something that's lacking, an opportunity to have people support a program and keep showing up for these kids like we are. Not make a quick little donation. I mean, $35 a month for us is, well, my niece says, I always tell this story, my niece said to me when I first came up with this number, and it was a real thing, and we came up with this sponsorship thing, and lives in Scottsdale, and young single yuppie, and she says to me, Aunt Kathleen, is this a real thing? Like $35 a month, I could keep a kid in school, that's real, like a kid, that funds a kid in your program. And I said, yep, that's a real number, Krista, that's based on our real costs. And she said, so I could drink 1 less bottle of wine a month, and I could keep a kid in school. And I, of course, said, well, you drink more expensive wine than me, because I could drink 3 fewer bottles of wine a month and keep a kid in school. But if you buy $35 bottles of wine, yeah, 1 less bottle of wine a month. But that really struck me, because it's how many Starbucks, or it's 1 less dinner out, and not even a fancy dinner out, a McDonald's dinner out. To us, that's not a huge amount, But to a kid in our program, it's literally life-changing, and we see it. So I think that the whole, I like the idea, even if we had unlimited funds from some large donor, I like the idea of connecting people here and giving them that opportunity to commit to a kid in our program. And I hope that the kids that are in kindergarten now, to see them through college. And I think it would be awesome to have sponsors stay with the kid and see them graduate from college and come down. We did have people sponsor a kid last year that came down to their graduations, like Lester, and got to see them graduate from 6th grade and go on to high school.
Lester is he's a doll. He is. We have some people say he is. See, and you know, there's a few people here and that know what we're talking about. When you go and you actually are there and you meet these people, you form this connection, and then it's wonderful because then you can start asking, how's Lester doing? And it's not just this random sea of people, but you said this, and I thought this was really smart. And I feel sometimes we're this way at One Church, is rather than casting a wide net, you want to dig a deep well.
We want to go deeper, not wider. I have no interest in anything but these kids in this community and impacting as many lives as we can and breaking that cycle of poverty for as many kids as we can for as long as I'm still breathing. I have no need to go impact 1 million kids all over the world or to take this program to many other places. I like going deeper rather than wider.
Craig, I want to give you some mic time because I know that we can hog that space.
No
what
worries.
were you going to say?
So you're talking about how do you know you're not just a drop of water in the ocean? And in the first video we saw, Carolina, the director down there, touched on it, but it's so true. This donation doesn't just help a kid go to school. It puts hope in their life. And what they do with that hope is they change everything. Yolanda, the girl that you guys all just saw, started to teach her mom how to read and write because her mom didn't know how. She's 8 years old. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's incredible. And now she goes, I want to run a program like you, Craig. I want to become a teacher. I want to go out and help more people. So by your donation, Dana, of $35, you're not just helping some random kid somewhere. It's a kid you can meet, a kid that's going to go change the world because of the gift that you have given to her. And that is all of it. That's everything. And that's why Yolanda's the one that hooked me when I first went down there. And she goes, hey, I want to go to school. I talked to Kathleen. She said, all right, let's do it. She goes, you know what?
Why not? I got nothing better to do.
Yolanda goes, all right, I'm going to take this and I'm going to change the world. I'm going to change my family. I'm going to change my community. And so it's that hope and that inspiration that something as simple as a bottle of wine for us costs.
One of our families said to me, and this really struck me, she said, Kathy, when you're just surviving, you can't dream. And we see that when we're focusing on education, and yes, we help provide food and other things because the kids won't be successful in school if we look at this very narrowly and aren't holistic in the way we approach it. But what we do see is when kids have a chance to go to school, most of their parents did not. They have hope now that things can be different through their kids. We're not focusing on the parents, we're focusing on the kids, and I think we tend to focus on the adults in the family and think we have to fix things there. But what we're finding is it's amazing to watch these families when their kids get to go to school, now they have hope.
And that's hope is an endless gift. Can we thank them for being here tonight and sharing their stories? Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Craig. And at this time, while they're getting ready to bring us into this next song, let's go ahead and take a moment of reflection. And I just invite you to take a posture of prayer and how you see fit. There's a lot we heard tonight, a lot we're thinking of, and I know so many of us are also thinking of maybe those that are in need here. And again, it can feel overwhelming when we think of there's needs all around us. And I think rather than being overwhelmed, maybe being invited into living a life that is beyond ourselves, really following the way of Jesus, which is living for more than ourselves, for much more than ourselves. There's a quote by Soren Kierkegaard that says, "The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays." Not to influence God, but change the nature of one who prays. So during this time, and as we go into this next moment of worship, I want you to think within yourself, within your own heart, and not ask for God to change or to change God's mind, no matter what that is. Because I know there's people in here that, missions aside, there's many people in this room that are going through things, that are hurting in different and various ways. And so may this next moment be a moment of reflection. A moment, instead of begging and pleading, maybe a moment of listening, a moment of reflection, a moment of listening to where is that divine spirit taking you and guiding you? And in what ways can we give beyond ourselves? God, may we, in this moment, seek to understand ways we can live so beyond ourselves that, as that prayer says, so many times we pray this again and again, to pray for our daily bread. And as that prayer says those words, give us our daily bread, may we also understand so many ways in which we already have daily bread. And may we in turn be the answer to others' prayers in giving that daily bread. In ways that you've given to us, we are grateful. In ways we've experienced divine love, we are grateful. The things we have, we are grateful. The things we don't have, may our eyes not be on that sight at this moment, but rather on what we have in this moment. We thank you for community, for love displayed in so many ways. May we continue to learn and be invited into this life and learn how to just be and learn how to join you in that. We say these things in the name of love. Amen.